was 50 when it hit me. 50. What a strange age. You're not quite old, but no longer young. The world doesn't rush toward you like it used to. You begin to notice things slipping, not just in the mirror, but in the silence between conversations, in the weight of your mornings, in the way people stop looking at you quite the same. At that age, I had women in my life. More than I ever thought I would. Dinners, hotel rooms, weekends that blurred together. Some were young and wild, others mature and elegant. But none of them ever stayed long enough to leave a mug on my kitchen shelf or a dent in my pillow. They came with perfume and left with silence. Funny how a man can be surrounded by people and still feel like he's living in a glass box. I remember one night, late spring, soft rain on the window. She was curled beside me, the sheets still warm from the kind of closeness that makes you forget time. Her laughter had filled the room hours earlier. But when I looked at her, I didn't see a future. I didn't even see a present. I saw a story already ending. Again, she slept, peaceful, and I just stared at the ceiling, wondering why I felt lonelier than I did the night before. Her breathing was steady. Mine was unsure. That's the kind of loneliness no one warns you about. The kind that wears a smile during the day and collapses into silence at 2 a.m. You see, at 50, I thought I was living the dream. Free, unattached, unbothered. I had a good job, a decent place downtown, and a charm that hadn't yet rusted. I told myself I was in control, that I chose this, that I didn't want to be tied down. But looking back now from 80, I realize it wasn't freedom I was chasing. It was distraction. And distraction, no matter how pretty her eyes or smooth her voice, has a cruel way of keeping your heart busy while your soul dries out. I kept my calendar full. Birthdays I barely remembered the next morning. Drinks with names I couldn't spell. Texts that meant nothing 5 minutes after reading. But when I got home and the music stopped, the quiet was loud, deafening. One night, I met a woman. Her name was Eleanor. She wasn't like the others. She didn't flirt, didn't play the game. We talked for 3 hours straight at a friend's party, sitting on the back steps while everyone else danced inside. She asked me things no one else did. Things like, what makes you feel safe? Or, do you ever miss who you used to be? I didn't have answers that night, but her questions haunted me more than any goodbye kiss ever had. We didn't end up together, life had other plans. But she was the first woman in years who saw me. Not my job, not my smile, not the version of me I polished for the world. Just me. That's when I realized something no one teaches you. Loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the absence of understanding. I had plenty of company, but very little connection. And connection, real connection, it doesn't happen in the rush. It happens in the stillness, in the conversations after the wine runs out, in the glances that linger, in the quiet acceptance of another's flaws. But I didn't have stillness back then. I filled every hour. I thought it made me interesting. Looking back, it just made me exhausted. The women I met weren't unkind. Most of them were lovely, but we were all playing roles, trying not to feel too much, ask too much, stay too long. We were protecting ourselves from the very thing we needed. I remember a Sunday morning, walking alone to the market. I saw an older couple, must have been in their 70s, sitting outside a cafe. No phones, no rush. She reached over and wiped a crumb from his beard. He smiled, like it was the first touch he'd felt in days. And I thought, when was the last time someone touched me like that, without expecting something in return? There's an intimacy in the ordinary that no one teaches you to crave. But once you see it, once you've tasted it, the rest of the world feels empty. That's the day I stopped pretending I was happy. Not because I lacked attention, but because I had forgotten what it felt like to be truly seen, and to truly see someone else. There was a period, maybe 3 or 4 years straight, when I didn't spend more than 2 nights a week alone. My phone would light up at odd hours. A glass of wine turned into a nightcap. A conversation turned into hands on skin. No promises, no questions. And I thought that made me wise, that I had outsmarted the trap of needing someone too much. But all that rotation, it wore something down in me. I remember a woman named Sandra. Sharp mind, traveled a lot, always had a story from Paris or Prague. We had this thing, unspoken but regular. Every Thursday night, like clockwork, she'd bring Thai food, I'd put on Coltrane. We didn't talk about our week. We didn't ask about each other's lives. It was like two actors who knew their lines perfectly, no room for improvisation. One night, she lingered, didn't reach for her coat right away, just sat there on the edge of the bed, quiet. Then she said, "Doesn't this feel hollow to you?" I didn't know what to say, because yes, God yes, but I'd built my whole identity around pretending it wasn't. Around being the guy who didn't need all that emotional stuff. The cool 50-year-old who could still keep up with the younger ones. Who didn't let anyone get too close. Truth is, I wasn't afraid of love. I was afraid of being known. Because to be known is to be vulnerable. And I had spent decades fortifying the walls around me. I wore loneliness like armor. Polished it so well that people thought it was confidence. But that night with Sandra, something cracked. I remember standing in the kitchen after she left, holding her empty wine glass, wondering how many people had passed through my life while I was too busy guarding the door. You reach a point, maybe it's 50, maybe it's earlier, where you start to feel the weight of all the things you didn't say. The apologies you never made. The connections you let wilt. And it's not dramatic. It doesn't come crashing down like in the movies. Creeps. In the way you sigh when the door closes behind you. In the drawer full of takeout menus no one else sees. In the second pillow that hasn't been used in weeks. I kept going, of course. That's what we do. We keep busy. Keep charming. Keep collecting experiences like souvenirs. Hoping they'll mean something when we finally slow down enough to look at them. But souvenirs without stories are just clutter. And most of mine came from nights I barely remembered and faces I never truly saw. You know, people always talk about the heartbreak of losing someone you love. But there's another kind of heartbreak, quieter, harder to name, that comes from realizing you've spent years next to people who never truly knew you. And you let it happen. I started to feel it in small ways. The way conversations got shorter. The way I'd avoid eye contact in the morning. The way I'd scroll through my contacts and feel no real pull to call anyone. One day, I was out with a woman. Lively, gorgeous, younger by a decade. Halfway through dinner, she laughed and said, "You're such a mystery. I don't know anything about you." And she was right. Not because she hadn't asked, but because I had nothing left I was willing to give. When I got home that night, I sat in the dark and whispered to myself, "I'm tired. Not physically, not even emotionally, really. Just tired of holding up a life that looked full, but felt hollow." And that's when the ache of solitude really started to settle in. Not the kind that screams, the kind that just sits with you, quiet, patient, waiting to be acknowledged. It didn't matter how many women I met, how many names I memorized, how many lipstick shades stained my sheets. At the end of the day, I was still going to bed with a version of myself I barely recognized. If you're still here, still listening to this old man ramble, leave me a comment, will you? Tell me if any of this makes sense to you. Or maybe just say hello. Sometimes even that feels like a kind of healing. There's something terrifying about silence when you've spent most of your life avoiding it. Around 51, maybe 52, the noise started to feel different. The crowded bars, the playlists on repeat, the constant flicker of screens. None of it worked the way it used to. The distractions lost their shine. I remember one night in particular. No plans, no calls. I poured myself a glass of scotch and sat on the balcony. The city hummed below, indifferent. Lights blinked in high-rise windows. Cars whispered by. A couple laughed somewhere down the block. And I just sat there, quiet. It should have been peaceful, but it wasn't. It felt like I had arrived at the edge of something. Not a cliff, but more like a mirror. And what I saw looking back wasn't the man I thought I'd be at 50. I thought I'd have more figured out by then. Thought I'd be grounded, wise, steady. Instead, I was floating, tethered to nothing, no one. Like a balloon someone let go of without meaning to. You know, there's a loneliness that creeps in when you realize no one knows your favorite memory. No one knows the version of you that cried at your father's funeral or laughed so hard you fell off your chair at your best friend's wedding. No one to share the sacred little things. The old stories, the quiet wounds, the private joys. It's not that I didn't try. There were women who wanted to go deeper, women who lingered at the edge of something real, but I always found a reason to pull away. Too soon, too intense, too much. Truth is, I was afraid of being chosen and then failing, of someone seeing all of me and deciding I wasn't enough. So instead, I made sure they only ever saw fragments. The charming fragments, the clever ones. Never the parts that trembled in the dark. And over time, those fragments became the only version of me I knew how to show. I started noticing it in little moments. When I'd reach for my phone out of habit, just to feel like someone was on the other end. When I'd scroll through old photos, not to remember, but to feel like I hadn't been invisible all along. There was a woman once, Marta. She was different, kind in a quiet way. She didn't need to be impressed. She just wanted presence. We spent a weekend by the coast, walking more than we talked. I remember sitting beside her on a bench watching the waves. She didn't touch me, didn't say anything for almost 10 minutes. And somehow that silence, it held more than most conversations I'd had in years. But I ruined it. I got scared, told her I didn't want anything serious, that she deserved someone more available. She didn't argue, just nodded, kissed my cheek, and left. I watched her walk away, and for a moment, I wanted to call her back. But the part of me that had gotten so good at pretending I was fine, it kept me frozen. What I didn't understand then, but do now, is that intimacy isn't built in passion. It's built in patience, in being willing to sit in the quiet with someone and not flinch. But back then, I flinched at everything, at vulnerability, at love, at the possibility of being fully known. You spend enough time flinching and soon, you start missing out on what actually matters. And slowly, your soul begins to shrink. Not in a way that others can see. You still laugh, still flirt, still show up to the dinner parties. But inside, there's a hollowness. The kind that doesn't scream for help. The kind that just hopes someone notices the difference between your smile and your silence. I was 50, and to the world, I looked like a man who had it all: charm, freedom, options. But every time I laid my head on that cold side of the bed, I knew something sacred was missing, and I couldn't pretend anymore. That's when I started writing in notebooks again. Not poems or big thoughts, just moments. Things I was afraid to say out loud. Regrets, names, quiet hopes. Like maybe if I wrote them down, I could start remembering who I was before I built all these walls. It didn't fix everything, but it helped me begin. Begin to listen to the ache instead of numbing it. Begin to look people in the eyes again, even when it scared me. Begin to wonder what life might be like if I actually let someone stay. There's a strange sort of courage that comes when you run out of performances. Around 53, I remember waking up one morning and realizing I couldn't keep doing it. The endless cycle, the rehearsed smiles, the shallow touches, the script I'd memorized so well I didn't even recognize my own voice anymore. I didn't have a dramatic meltdown or some life-altering moment. I just got tired of being a ghost in my own life. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I said no. No to the invitation I knew would lead nowhere. No to the late-night text I didn't really want to answer. No to pretending that being wanted was the same as being valued. And for the first time in a long while, I started sitting with myself. Not the curated version. The real one. The one who missed his mother when it rained. The one who carried shame he couldn't name. The one who wanted to be held without needing to earn it. You'd think that kind of honesty would feel freeing. But it didn't. Not at first. Felt like grief. Because I had to mourn the years I spent running. I had to mourn the man I pretended to be. And maybe hardest of all, I had to mourn the connections I pushed away because I was too afraid to stand still long enough to let them reach me. That winter, I met someone. Her name was Jo. She wasn't dazzling. She wasn't younger. She didn't play the game. She was just present. I met her at a bookstore of all places. She was in the poetry aisle, flipping through a worn copy of Mary Oliver. I made a joke, something forgettable, but she laughed like it mattered. We got coffee that afternoon, talked about books, grief, old dogs, the way we both hated the word networking. And then she looked at me. not through me, not past me, and said, "You seem like someone who's finally ready to be seen." I didn't know what to do with that. Part of me wanted to run, but another part, the part I'd kept hidden for decades, wanted to cry. She didn't try to fix me, didn't ask for explanations. She just showed up again and again, quietly, consistently, and slowly. I began to let her in, not all at once. I still flinched, still braced for rejection, still caught myself reverting to charm when vulnerability felt too raw. But she saw through it, not with judgment, with patience. She'd touch my arm during dinner, not to distract me, but to remind me, "I'm here." She'd ask questions I didn't know how to answer and didn't rush me when I stumbled through. For the first time, I let someone see the version of me that wasn't polished, wasn't confident, wasn't impressive. And instead of walking away, she leaned closer. That kind of presence, it does something to a man, especially one who spent years believing he had to perform to be loved. We weren't perfect. We had disagreements. I still had nights where I shut down without meaning to, but we kept choosing to stay, and that, I've learned, is where intimacy begins. It's not in the grand gestures or the declarations. It's in the ordinary, the repetition, the small, steady choice to show up, even when the old version of you wants to hide. There was one morning, gray sky, kettle boiling. Joe was in the kitchen, humming. I was reading the paper, half awake. She turned to me and said, "You seem different lately, softer." And I realized she was right. Something had shifted. Not because I had found the one, but because I had finally stopped abandoning myself. The loneliness didn't disappear overnight, but it started to loosen, like a knot I'd carried for years finally beginning to unwind, because someone was finally close enough to help me hold it. And even more importantly, I was finally letting them. There's a tenderness that only comes with age. Not the soft kind that makes you sentimental, but the kind that rises from finally understanding how much of life we spend looking the wrong way. I look back now, sitting here in the quiet of my old wooden chair, the garden swaying outside, and I see it all more clearly than ever. I wasn't broken at 50, just lost, and not in some dramatic way, not the kind of lost where people rush to help. I was lost in the way people are when they smile too quickly and answer, "I'm good," before you even finish asking. The kind of lost that hides behind charm, success, even affection. It took me years to see that being surrounded by people doesn't mean you're not alone. I had to unlearn the idea that love is about being wanted. It's not. Love, the real kind, is quiet. It's steady. It sits beside you on bad days and doesn't flinch when you forget how to speak. It doesn't need grand entrances or perfect timing. It just stays. Jo didn't stay forever. She moved to Oregon a few years after we met. Her son had health issues and she needed to be closer. We said our goodbyes slowly, tenderly. No slammed doors, no broken hearts. Just two people who had found something rare, even if only for a season. And that's the thing I never understood at 50. Not everything beautiful is meant to last forever. But that doesn't make it any less sacred. She taught me how to sit with silence, how to hold eye contact without retreating, how to tell the truth without trying to shape it into something more flattering. I spent so many years avoiding vulnerability, thinking it was weakness. But now I know vulnerability is how you offer someone the most honest version of yourself. And that's the version I wish I had given more of back then. So if you're somewhere around that age now, 50, maybe a little younger, maybe older, I'll tell you what I wish someone had whispered to me. Stop measuring your life by how full your bed is or how many names are stored in your phone. Start asking who knows your silences, who knows the story behind your favorite meal, who would notice if your laughter felt just a little off this week. Because that's where real companionship lives, in the unnoticed corners, in the details most people forget to ask about. You might be tempted, as I was, to keep moving, keep collecting, keep proving. But one day, when the music fades and the guests go home, you'll find yourself sitting across from yourself. And you'll want to know you did more than just keep busy. You'll want to know you lived with intention, that you opened your heart, even when it trembled, that you let at least one person really see you. And if you haven't yet, it's not too late. Even at 80, I still sit by this window and write letters I'll never send. Still hum songs I used to dance to with people whose names I barely remember. Still feel that same ache for connection some nights. But it's softer now. It no longer shames me. It simply reminds me that I was made to love. And be loved in return. If you're still with me, still listening after all this, thank you. Truly. If you'd like to return sometime, you know where to find me. This space doesn't go anywhere. I'll be here. Old, slow, and still learning. Waiting to share whatever little light I've got left.